We'll get started then. Hi, everybody. Welcome to NolCon. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. My name's Adam Ruddermann. I typically go by Rud, and this is my fourth year being here, either speaking or attending in some form. Really excited. It's beautiful here in Goa, and I really hope that this talk is productive and useful for you today. I'm going to leave some decent time at the end for questions, so don't feel like, and I really would love to have those questions be a conversation. So please feel free to ask questions at the end, and also if you see me around the conference or wherever, just grab me. I'm here for you all. Came here from San Francisco, so please leverage me as a resource while I'm in town. Hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on Instagram, or whatever, and let's just keep chatting, all right? So this talk is using bug bounty to get a job in Silicon Valley. So let's a little bit about me. I am the practice director for bug bounty services at NCC Group. Why should you be listening to me? So a little bit about my background. I got started in the United States Air Force. I spent a lot of that time at the National Security Agency. I helped start U.S. Cyber Command, the network defense watch floor for U.S. Cyber Command, as it was transitioning from the Defense Information Systems Agency to NSA control. I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton of Edward Snowden fame. I did various things across the intelligence community in a consulting capacity. Got a little bit tired of DC and government work, and was one of the early employees of SYNAC, which most of you have probably heard of, is one of the big 3 bug bounty startups. I was the original triager for SYNAC, so if you were submitting to SYNAC very early on, hi, it's nice to meet you finally. I went on from there to Facebook. I was not hired for bug bounty, but I eventually was the technical program manager for its bug bounty program. I did a bunch of other stuff there too, like user data protection and account lifecycle management and cool stuff like that. But my claim to fame is being the TPM for the bug bounty program. And then I was invited to take over the bug bounty services practice at NCC Group, which pre-existed me. NCC Group is one of the original players in the bug bounty space, but we're very quiet. Usually this is in a consultative staff augmentation capacity supporting bug bounty programs. If you have submitted to one of the larger bug bounty programs on HackerOne, there's a very, very, very good chance that you have dealt with one of my folks at some point in your bug bounty careers at NCC. But we don't just do that. We're a global company based in the UK. And we offer a whole bunch of security services. We try to make bug bounty fit in that correctly. So, just in case anybody in the room here has no idea what I'm talking about bug bounty, I'm going to do a really quick overview. So, what is bug bounty? Security researchers or white hats or hackers or millennials go and they are using products and they find security bugs. Okay? They then report it in a responsible way to the organization that owns that product and tell them about the bug and give them time to fix the bug before they tell anyone else about it, so that no one is affected by the bug. And then depending upon the company and the bug bounty or disclosure program, they may or may not get a monetary award. They might get a t-shirt, they might get reputational school points. But the general model is like you have a whole crowd of people around the world trying to find security bugs and being responsible with that information and not using it for bad. So what? Well, nowadays that cool idea now has many big name logos like the ones you recognize here running these programs. And so being bug bounty has now become a norm in the security testing business. And excuse me, and as companies mature internally and get better at fixing bugs and get better at figuring out how to leverage the crowdsourced community, they're adding bug bounty as one aspect of many in their security testing strategy. And there's some really great examples of why this is happening. Here's a fun example of tokens being leaked by GitHub, in GitHub by Snapchat. This was a publicly disclosed bug on HackerOne. This researcher found it 7 hours after it happened. That's an amazing turnaround time. That's like incredible. That's very impressive. And this is the value people are seeing out of bug bounty. And that person made 15 grand off of it. Like, not too bad. It's a pretty good day at work, right? I used to work at Facebook, so I'm a little biased towards that. This happened while I was there, we paid $10,000 for a kid to a 10-year-old in Finland. That's awesome. Like, that's life-changing, and hopefully that person goes into security. He got to meet the Prime Minister of Finland. It's pretty cool for a 10-year-old. And Facebook, since leaving, has expanded what they do for bug bounty to include user data abuse, which is great. This is a really great use of the community, and frankly, that's why I've come here for so many years, because the Indian research community is so integral to the bug bounty industry. And people are just getting paid a lot of money. There's a lot of money. This is a real business. This is a real profession. And there's tons of opportunity in it. And you know what? The only person that's necessary for you to start being successful in bug bounty is yourself, which is personally, I grew up, I was homeless one time in my life. I grew up very, very poor. And so that's why I love bug bounty, because all you need is you and your own motivation effort. And you can make a lot of money and really get somewhere in life. It's really cool. So, hopefully I've pitched you on the emotional part and like you're sold. So now you're wondering like, where do I start maybe? So I don't know if y'all were here for Jason Haddix's fantastic talk. It's like awesome. I've seen it for 3 years now. If you didn't get to sit in it, I recommend watching it later on the recording. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to assume you don't really know a lot of what's going on, and this is just a first interest. So sorry if I'm boring like more expert folks here. So let's say you're still learning. First, you got to start basic. Let's start with something where there's guidance, something where there's a template you can follow and you can learn. Just start with learning what the OWASP top 10 is. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it. Trust me, it's a big deal in the security industry. But what this means effectively is you start learning security testing with web and mobile web products and mobile APIs. It's the most technically straightforward place to start. Trust me. The nice thing about it also is that many of the bugs from a black box testing perspective look very, very similar. So you can start becoming an expert in cross-site scripting. And then once you feel like you're comfortable with that, you can start learning more about SQL injection. And then you can start learning about CSRF bugs and so on and so forth. And you can start growing your security knowledge at your own pace while at the same time finding very valid and impactful security bugs, even if you don't have that comprehensive knowledge net. And that's great. But a key part of that, besides just learning cross-site scripting and SQL injection and the like, is actually learning a comprehensive security testing methodology. Like, how does a pen testing company like NCC Group, when we get hired to do a 2-week pen test for a web product, how do we actually guarantee that we're providing sufficient coverage, that we're actually testing the entire product the way that we say we will? There's a method to the madness. There's a stepwise process that we follow. And many of these processes in various forms are on the internet and available for you to learn. OWASP, again, actually has a really solid reference for various testing methodologies that you can Google. So if you were to Google like OWASP security testing methodologies, it'll absolutely be the first hit on Google. I tested it before I put it on here. But if you just Google for security testing methodologies in general, you'll find a lot. I'm not specifically referencing one because I don't think that any of them are perfect. They each have their own different perspective and approach to things, especially from a technical perspective. And so I think this is an area where it's really about learning the mental approach and day-to-day methods of actually doing security testing, which Jason actually covered a bit in his talk as well, and I recommend checking that out. But it's really important for if you want to like actually get a job out of this, instead of just finding bugs and getting paid from bounties, which is great, but if you actually want to turn this into a job, understanding a comprehensive methodology is critical, because a company's not going to hire you because you're good at finding cross-site scripting bugs. Like, that's just the reality. They're looking for someone who is holistically talented in security. And so understanding how you by yourself as an employee of a company could be responsible for testing an internal product end to end is critically important. While you're doing this, I want to just emphasize something really important really quick, because a lot of folks, especially early on in their bug bounty careers, fall into this trap, is that it's easy to find. You'll also find this on the methodology pages about scanners. There's lots and lots of scanners out there that provide a lot of theoretical or informational bugs that in reality are not bugs or at all, because they're just scanners and they're just dumb and they're just running off of a signature. Or instead, like, the bug is real from the scanner's perspective. It's just that the product has mitigated that risk in some way that's not apparent to the scanner. They don't know what else is going on. They just see this one flaw that by the signature looks like this is an issue, but there's actually another way to resolve that than directly addressing the issue as the scanner suggests fixing it. So if you find yourself doing bug bounty and you're trying to learn, you're actually trying to make a career out of this is actually good advice for bug bounty in general. But if you actually want to make a career out of this, and you find yourself using scanners, you're finding these informational bugs, and you're thinking about reporting it, stop. And think for a second, like if your job was to manage this product, and you have a multi-million-dollar a year security budget, which most of the products that you would be testing bug bounty do, I can assure you that they have run the scanner themselves. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. And so really, for you to learn how to be an effective, not a pen tester, not a bug bounty hunter, but a security engineer, it's about taking those scanning results and doing something with them and recognizing that your value in the bug bounty interaction is not in repeating what they already know. It's in finding new things. That's why they crowdsource. That's why they do things beside pen testing. They're looking for more breadth, not someone to tell them what they've already found. And I assure you, they have already read the scanner themselves, and that they have made either a qualified decision to not fix it for a valid reason, or they fixed it in a way that's not apparent to the scanner, like I said before. Another way to understand and calibrate yourself to bugs, so you can understand what's impactful and focus on useful, impactful, severe bugs, so that you can grow yourself as a technical expert, is actually look at the out-of-scope bugs and bug bounty programs. There's a wealth of information in there. That information is super valuable because you can suddenly kind of see into the minds of the security engineer who wrote that on the other side and said, we don't care about these sorts of cookie attacks. We don't care about these sorts of CSRF on logout. These are valid security issues, but in practice, what is the actual impact to the user? Really nothing. And the effort potentially to fix some of these things is so extraordinary that other mitigations can deal with the worst of it, and then the rest of it's just you have to just move on because you've got an entire product to protect, not just the things that bug bounty people see. You're also just hurting yourself. It might seem like there's a saying in English, throwing spaghetti at the wall, spaghetti sticks sometimes to a wall. It might seem like, hey, I'm going to get paid, I'm learning, I'm finding all these bugs. I'm going to just throw spaghetti at the wall and submit a whole bunch of stuff. But the issue is that you're really wasting your own time, because the point of bug bounty is a phenomenal opportunity for you to grow and challenge yourself. This is where you have a chance to find actual security bugs and submit them to a company in San Francisco and actually get their attention. Take that opportunity. Your own reputation's at stake because they remember. Trust me. So in practice, what do you do? If you're really starting out from zero, there's some really great sandboxes you can use to start playing around and actually finding security bugs and looking at source code. These are a few examples. Google has a nice one, and there's the damn vulnerable apps. There's a few different ones. These are just the highlights of two of them. Excuse me. Sorry, I landed at 8 o'clock this morning from San Francisco. I'm a little... All right, cool. So what have we talked about so far? So far, we've talked about the fact that bug bounty is a great place for you to be able to just start doing testing on your own, and that you need to have some form of methodology so that you're being consistent and you're providing coverage to yourself, coverage of the product, so you can potentially find bugs that others have not found before. Because a lot of bug bounty hunters are just finding the next cross-site scripting bug, which does make them money. Don't get me wrong, but it's not how you get a job doing that, because you need to do more than just that. You need to challenge yourself to find many different classes of bugs. So now what? Well, now you start going on the bug bounty platforms. Okay. There's HackerOne, Bugcrowd, Synack. You've all heard of them probably. My general advice for someone who genuinely wants to take this and build a CV so they can get a job: one, you have to make this sustainable for you. This is a long-term project. This is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 3 months. This is a long-term effort. Just for some perspective, I worked at the NSA for a decade, and it took me 3 years to get a job in San Francisco. It's hard. It's super competitive. That's just reality, right? So this is a life project, right? I find me being able to get a job in San Francisco was one of the monumental events of my life. I hope that if that's something your goal, that you get to achieve that as well, because there's tons of opportunity, and there's tons of folks from India and all over the world getting brought in for their talents, because frankly, there's not enough talent in the United States to fill all these job recs. It's just insane. Like they're inflating buildings at this point. They're just filling them up. So you have to make it sustain. I mentioned this because you have to make it sustainable. So while there's a lot of bug bounty programs that do not pay, that maybe it's easier to find bugs, and that's a good place to start, especially early on. And we'll get to that in a second. It's really important for you to make this sustainable for yourself financially. So focus on programs that pay money. Another important part of that is that the programs that pay money generally have a larger scope and more programs because these are more mature programs. And so there's a lot more opportunity and there's a lot more attack surface for you to find stuff. Those programs are also typically a little bit more responsive and are paying attention more and actually are much more likely to actually action your bugs. There's an exception here. Government programs, like the US government programs and the UK government programs are out there. They're a little different. Governments are like their own thing, so just keep that in mind. I mentioned the submitting to programs potentially that don't give you any money. The reality is that the bug bounty platforms, HackerOne and BugCrowd, and just, for full disclosure, NCC Group does partner with HackerOne exclusively for platform. The reality is that to get access to some of the cooler programs, I'll talk about this more in a second, you have to build a reputation. So sometimes that does mean submitting bugs to maybe less mature programs that don't pay so that you can find easier bugs earlier on and build yourself up to finding harder bugs where the surface area has been less picked over. This is an example of Franz Rosen. He was actually here last year. He's Swedish, and he's a really great researcher. I highly recommend following him on Twitter. You learn a lot from him, just seeing what he's talking about and thinking about. So, like I said, you have to build up some reputation. You have to prove that you're actually submitting good bugs, that you're a fair player, that you're not trying to that you can interact professionally with these bug bounty programs. And once you've done that, you'll get invited to private programs, and you also have the opportunity to kind of start working on more advanced programs. So here, for example, more advanced programs are Facebook. This is the main Google VRP. And there's other great examples. There's Microsoft, and there's Uber, PayPal. There's also the Android VRP at Google. These are very advanced programs. The reality is that Facebook's very picked over. Like Facebook's surface area is pretty solidified. It's the volume of submissions, they do yearly reviews. The volume of submissions are in the tens of thousands. So these require depth. But again, the purpose of this talk is to get you a job, not make bounties. And so depth is critical, demonstrating you have the ability to go deep and actually become an expert in something on your own time, on your own merits, and actually find valid bugs. That's impressive. Regardless of the context, that's impressive. That's cool. And that's something that hiring managers and the like are going to be paying attention to. But here's another interesting thing. If you start paying attention to yourself while you're going through this process, you will super quickly realize what you do not know and understand. Because especially if you pay attention to blog posts and Twitter for some of the more experienced and very knowledgeable researchers, sometimes they post stuff where I have to block an hour of my time and I'm going to go read this and really dig into it because it's super complex and it's pretty esoteric, meaning it's kind of like weird niche sort of testing. But you know what? Some of the most impressive bugs come out that way. And that is exactly what companies are looking for when they're hiring. They're looking for people who can demonstrate that depth of knowledge to be able to go farther than maybe a pen testing company like NCC would after just like a 2-week test. Somebody who actually become an expert in a product and do effective testing with that domain knowledge in that product. My best advice, because I've done this myself and I've seen others do it, when you encounter something you don't understand or feel super duper comfortable with, and by that I mean you could explain it completely to somebody else verbally. I think that's a good bar to be able to go over. Track it, keep it in a spreadsheet. Understand what you don't know and follow up on that and target that to learn. Because if you don't challenge yourself to find bugs that you can't find new bugs that you can't today, you're not going to grow and learn. You're going to make great money doing bounties, but it's not the comprehensive depth that an employer in Silicon Valley is looking for to sponsor you for a visa or much less even look at the CV, frankly. Another important thing with this is as you are submitting to bug bounty programs, you'll quickly realize what companies care about and what they don't care about. And that differs wildly, not just by company, but by product. Because the reality is, going back to what I mentioned before, they have various different mitigations for potential security vulnerabilities that are not going to be obvious to an external user. But so you almost have to, in the dark, kind of feel out the shape of the room until you understand the shape of the room, and then you can be super effective. And when you understand the shape of the room and you figured it out blind, that's impressive. And demonstrating that ability is super important to be able to demonstrate that you actually have the analytical ability to go deep and be able to be the only person performing an internal pen test for a product before it goes live. Another important aspect of that is understanding the impact to your bugs. I mentioned about feeling out the shape of the room. That the reality is that CVSS is really a pretty awful way to measure the severity and impact of a security bug. And that's not because CVSS is inherently flawed. It's just that context matters, and CVSS is basically just buttonology with humans that requires some, some judgment calls. And I actually have a client that I'm going to be going to in Chicago. They're a really large enterprise software company that I'm helping reboot their vulnerability management program so they can build a bug bounty program, because right now they're not really good at fixing bugs quickly. And one of the first things we're doing is just ripping out CVSS, because we actually had a test where we gave 5 different people on the team the same bug and told them to figure out the CVSS score for it, and we got 4 different responses. That's just the reality of CVSS. So don't take that as the mark of truth. Think of the actual impact. Understand the attack scenario from start to finish. Like, you, the attacker, are going to go after this user, and in the end, this is going to be the outcome. Map that from end to end. If you can't do that, you're not there yet. If you find yourself able to do that, and the story is a little bit weak, it probably is because the bug's weak, frankly. And that's just the unfortunate reality of a lot of bug bounty submissions, which is okay in bug bounty, but it's not great for a security test when they're trying to hire you as an employee. They want to get value out of you, and they want you to be in sync with them. I talked about this a little bit before. Go deep and demonstrate true expertise in your bug bounty submissions, not just for the sake of making more money, because you'll make a lot more money in bug bounty that way, but also to challenge yourself to grow as a security professional. I use this as an example. This is the Graph API Explorer for Facebook. You can go on this right now, and you can learn the Graph API to directly query Facebook's database. And there's a guy, his name's Philippe, who lives in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm pretty convinced that he knows Facebook's Graph API better than 90% of Facebook employees. And he gets $27,000 bugs because of it. That's real. I mean, 27 grand. I mean, that's good money anywhere. That's amazing, right? But that's because he demonstrated that depth of expertise. Philippe works on other programs, but he focuses primarily on Facebook. And I use that because it's a good personal example for me. But this is true for many, many different products at many, many companies. This is just like an easy to screenshot example. But you can check him out, PHWD on Twitter. Super insightful, super nice guy. Like, he actually wants to help everybody in the community be better and really professionalize bug bounty. I won't speak for him, but I've gotten the vibe that he's pretty happy surfing in the Caribbean and submitting bugs instead of trying to get a job and having to do an hour commute in San Francisco. But otherwise, he's demonstrating that depth to be able to actually be a security engineer, because he went and took the time to understand the product, and he understands the impact. He doesn't submit bugs sometimes he submits invalid bugs. Everybody does. There's something you don't know. It's fine. But the bugs he finds are super unique because he understands the product, and he's demonstrated the ability to do that. And a lot of people in bug bounty don't. Okay, so you can find bugs, but now here's the harder part. And this is actually much, much harder. Can you fix them? Remember, I used the title security engineer. You're not a pen tester. You're not by yourself. You're not just doing pen tests. You're not just evaluating. You're an engineer. That's what. Now, well, not exclusively. A majority of companies in Silicon Valley are looking for someone who not only can find bugs, but fix them. And that's a pretty high bar. bug bounty is inherently a reactive test. The bug's already in production. The bug is affecting users right now. And that's really not a great place to be for a company. Like, you would rather the bug never went out to begin with. You'd rather have found it while software was being developed, or prevented it from even being written into software. That's where these companies really want to be. And that's where many of them right now, and especially in the last 5 years, I've seen the transition in security budgets in Silicon Valley moving towards preventative work rather than reactive work, like more tests and things like that. So the real goal of hiring a security engineer is as much to help find bugs as to help make sure they never happen to begin with. So if you have a super deep technical understanding of the product, and you see the same security issue keep coming up over and over and over again in new code, well, your job is to make sure that is to put the pieces together and say, ask the question, well, how can we change the way our engineers actually write features like this so that they never introduce the bug to begin with? I highly recommend actually Googling about how Facebook's done this, because they've done quite a bit of publishing on this. To the point where internal functions that are potentially dangerous, they actually rename the function in the code base. So you have to write, this is a dangerous thing to do as the function name. And that actually helps. Little things like that. But again, that means you have to be a software engineer. That means you have to write code. And it's not just about the product itself. It's also about being able to write security tooling for the security team so that you can scale yourselves. Some companies only have a few folks, because they're brand new startups or something like that. They don't have a ton of folks. So manual effort is highly frowned upon, and being able to automate yourself out of the rudimentary and getting yourself into the thinking and the fixing and the preventing is really where security engineering talent in the Valley is. Also, you'll get paid way, way more if you actually have security and actually just have software engineering skills. That's just the way the Valley works. There's a lot of bias towards software engineers, and especially from an equity grant perspective. So theoretically, you could get a job in a lot of tech companies just being a pen tester or red teamer. Especially, this is more true for the very, very large companies, but it's true for smaller ones as well, depending upon the product. But this is a very, 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 very hard path to getting a visa. I'll just be honest with you, because there's a lot of talent that can only find bugs but can't fix them. There's a lot more than people who can do both. And so putting yourself in the pool of people who can only find bugs is very restrictive and really limits your opportunities, I think. There's exceptions, of course. I'm not saying this is the law, but as a trend, being on a lot of interview loops and being a hiring manager, you're just making yourself way more potentially valuable and worth the effort to justify the visa if you're more than if you're a fixer and a finder. Another aspect of this is that the reality is internal security teams actually have access to the source code, so they don't need to do black box testing. Black box testing, which is what bug bounty is. Black box is where you are literally given a magical black box and you have to figure out how to break it. You don't understand it at all. You don't know what's on the inside. That's what bug bounty is, and that's what a lot of pen tests are. But if you have access to the source code, you can actually crack that open and actually see how it works and analyze it and find classes of bugs that you would never be able to find in black box, because you would need infinite amount of time to find all these different attack vectors against the magic box. Versus if you have the source code, you can look through it and see design flaws that are very apparent and a black box test would never find. So a lot of internal security reviews, they don't call them pen tests a lot of times in companies, they call them a security review, involves source code. And so if you you don't have to be an amazing software engineer, but you do need to be able to find security flaws in source, which is not easy. Heads up. It's not easy. There's a reason these jobs pay a fortune. If you're still learning, which frankly I am too, you have to crawl and then walk and then run. And there's two aspects to the software, to the being able to write code part of this. One, there's security engineering. That's writing security tools for the team itself. Honestly, the best place to start is to reinvent the wheel. If there's a security tool that you're using, try to replicate a feature of it for yourself from scratch. The nice thing about that is you'll have a reference when you get totally stuck, you have no idea how to approach that. You can kind of cheat and look and help yourself move along independently without having to go ask the internet for help all the time. And then walk means eventually, especially if you have like a really solid, consistent methodology, which all of the top bug bounty hunters do have, you'll eventually find a process that's ridiculously painful and manual and not a great use of your time. And then you can automate it and you'll create new tooling. Maybe you'll release that tooling, maybe not. You can put it on a CV and talk about it in an interview regardless. And then there's software engineering. So I'm trying to separate the two, but let's talk about the previous was about tools, writing tools that are security related versus being able to actually write software. So to crawl, frankly, look at a non-security related open source project that's relatively straightforward. The damn vulnerable applications are actually a great place to look at that because those are purposely vulnerable. So you can look at the source code, especially the web apps. The other part of it is actually looking at a large code base by yourself in an open source project and actually being able to add a feature, understanding how to add features in large code bases. It's completely different than when you write your own little web app. Like very large code bases are a complete different ballgame from an engineering perspective. And once you're actually used to being able to write new features in a large code base, engage with the project. This is just, by the way, this is just one way of doing it. This is my easy generic recommendation. You don't have to like live by it by any means, but what can I recommend to an entire room of people that I don't know in India? This is probably the most safest and generic way, but I'm sure you could find others that have the same merits for sure. Engage with an open source project. And I think it's a great place to start. Just like sign up, look in the backlog and sign up to like either fix a bug or add a feature. It's a place to start. You're now not just learning how to write code in a large code base, but you're actually committing code with other people committing code simultaneously, which is a skill to itself. Like being able to merge code is actually a whole thing. These are people's jobs. It's just to deal with release management. Let's see. And how do you run? You crush it and you let people see it. The nice thing is with open source projects is that it's easy to put on your CV. If you might have a job in software engineering, but you can talk about that in generic terms. But you know what? Open source projects, you can just give them your GitHub, and they'll look for it themselves, and that's real. I'll be honest with you. Being in interview loops, people who provided like really solid like GitHub profiles, those went straight to the top because that's real. We could evaluate their code quality remotely in the real world on the spot without even an interview and have an idea of who we wanted to talk to, who we didn't. Super powerful. These are two examples that are kind of security related, so to kind of stay to the bug bounty angle. So one is that Google has the Patch Rewards program, and so Google has a bunch of open source products. If you find a bug in a Google open source product, they'll happily like take your submission in bug bounty and they'll pay you out for it if it's valid, of course. But they'll pay you extra money if you actually submit the fix for it too. So you actually can get paid for writing code for Google for fixing the bug that you found. And that's super legit. And that's like a crazy good resume, a CV bullet. Sorry, I call them resumes in America. Another one is the EU actually just awarded a contract and is launching bug bounties for various open source pieces of software. And you can Google for FOSSA 2 bug bounties and you'll find the list. There's a bunch of stuff in there. These are what's really good about these is that they're very challenging, but they're also well-known products that need a lot of love, like SSLs in there, and I forget some of the others off the top of my head right now, but these are, while advanced, this is something to challenge yourself with. If you really want to challenge yourself and you want to understand the boundaries of your own technical knowledge from a security perspective and a software engineering perspective, these are great ways to do it. Because if you're engaging with that and you're genuinely trying, two things will happen. One, you'll understand your boundaries and what confuses you. And two, you'll see what people who are successful are doing and the way they talk. And you'll basically get to have the experience of being around like a high quality engineering team without having to work in one of those companies. And that exposure and experience is invaluable for you to be able to be effective yourself. Most importantly of all, though, is you need to round yourself out. Write the details of your bugs in detail and publish them. Really walk through it, not just the steps like I found this cool bug, here's what it does, but actually walk through and explain to people how you got there. Tell them a story. The purpose of this is not necessarily to broadcast to the world, that's fine, but it's actually to challenge yourself to see if you're effective in telling a story. Because most of the time, if you're a security engineer for a software company, you're going to spend most of your time talking to software engineers and explaining stories on like why these bugs are bad and why they should fix them. Because these software engineering teams, like they might have growth numbers to hit. They have, Wall Street expects certain daily monthly active user numbers. They expect that. And these engineering teams are building new features around those numbers. And the last thing they want to deal with is a security bug. Especially if it's like a super low priority, like, yes, technically we should fix this, but the impact is like this affects like 0.5% of users in really esoteric situations. So yes, you're right, we should fix it, but we can wait 6 months and it's okay. So being able to tell that story is really important. The other part is that demonstrate that you're actually able to help others. Train people, get on stage, mentor people one-on-one. Do both of those things because they're different skill sets. Being able to actually mentor someone one-on-one is a completely different skill set than being able to get on a stage like this. And ideally, you can do both because the reality is that at least the security engineers at Facebook were expected to be able to do both. This is probably the most important one. I think in the context of bug bounty must be said because there's a lot of horror stories for researchers gone wild in the bug bounty space. That's really unfortunate because it undermines the credibility of the entirety of crowdsourced testing. We're at a security conference in India. We're on a beach in Goa. It's great. It's beautiful. We're about a bunch of hacker types. There's going to be a party tonight. It's awesome, right? And so it's easy to think that our entire industry is like this, which can be true. Don't get me wrong. It is like that. If you've ever been to DEF CON, it's absolutely like that for a week. But just to give you some quick perspective, this is a slide from a deck I give to executives to help my clients get new budget for bug bounty programs over the finish line to help them understand. This is what they're thinking about. You're thinking about money. You're thinking about getting a job. The people on the receiving end of these bugs, the person you're trying to be, this is what they're thinking about. They're thinking about lawyers, and they're thinking about like PR people, and they're thinking about service level agreements, and they're thinking about merging bugs, and thinking about how the hell we're going to pay people without like the IRS coming after us, or like, oh man, like this person lives in like Syria, like can I send them money? These are real things. Like super, super hard real things. Like I don't want to go to jail sending money to like Iran if that turns out to be illegal. I don't know. Like these are what these companies are thinking about. That's what the individuals are thinking about. And you need to understand that because you are going to be on the other side of that if you actually are successful here. I mean, look at this. This is just the legal stuff. This is crazy. Like this is somebody's job. Like, I'll leave that up there for a minute so you can just like absorb the horror of what legal system's done. But it's real. It's really, so it's easy to think that you're in this, but this is actually what you're dealing with. And I think that mental, as much as like I'm here on shorts and we're totally cool, most of the meetings I had as a technical program manager at Facebook were with people who looked exactly like this, and those conference rooms looked exactly like that. Like I was like the one guy in shorts, but because I could be the guy in shorts because I was technically competent and I had like that respect to be the technical nerdy guy wearing shorts to a meeting literally with like I remember one meeting we had to get a bigger conference room. We had a 12-person table of nothing but lawyers. And they're all dressed like that, even at Facebook. And there's me like this, right? But so it's easy to like think we're in this chill space, but this is people's livelihoods. These are these companies' brands on the line, and they take it super, super seriously. And you need to respect that in order to play the game. So yeah, even if you're not working yet, maybe you're still doing bug bounty from your house. Maybe you're making solid money doing it. Treat it like a job. Follow the rules. Communicate professionally. Listen to your audience and learn from them. Empathize with them. Build mutual trust. And build relationships locally in your security community and globally across the community. Like me, like I started out. Hit me up on LinkedIn, please. Happy to do that. Because the reality is when you submit that CV, you know who's going to be like your network and your mentors and your interviewers and your hiring managers, those people you are submitting bugs to. And I assure you they will remember. right? Because here's what happens. This is a famous one. You can Google just Uber HackerOne taxi driver. This is a famous one. This particular researcher was displeased with having their reputation score on HackerOne reduced for them submitting a bug that they admitted from the beginning was out of scope. Like they wrote in their original report, out of scope. I know it's out of scope, but I want to submit it anyway. And when Uber closed it, saying it was out of scope, just as the report said, got a little perturbed. This is my favorite. When I do new hires, this is like slide 3. Like, welcome to Bug Bounty. You're triaging. Let's just get the hard parts out of the way first. People are going to swear at you. It's real. And finally, I'm going to give you a moment of honesty, because this is a big thing globally. The unfortunate reality is that the language of the security industry is English. I've encountered folks that while at a base, while verbal communication skills are super important, if you can just master the written English language well, you're at a great start. I've had meetings with engineers in many household name companies who I could not understand across the conference room table, but I never realized that they struggled speaking English verbally because their emails and messages were so well written, right? They had, like, their accent was rough. They were never surrounded by native English speakers when they're learning how to speak, but they understood English really well. So it's really, really important. So ideally, we'd all talk like this guy, because, man, he's a great public speaker. He can communicate professionally, he can empathize, he can tell a story, and he can actually get in the nitty-gritty details without making people feel stupid. It's really important. You're not there to judge as a security professional as much as we like to. We're there to help. You can even talk like her and be like super formal and like really uptight and really like to the point and be above everybody. You can even talk like this guy and be super goofy. But you know what? When he started talking about animals and like their behavior, he got super technical and super serious, and people stopped and listened. Even though he was super kooky about it while I did it. It was super fun and great TV. I'll tell you one thing you shouldn't do. Never talk like this guy. Okay? There's no situation where that's okay. Let's be real, okay? Because here's what happens. Remember that report before? That person was banned from Uber's program, and then HackerOne decided to jump on in and like just pile on. And here we are, this person's name out there, and we're talking about it right here in a room of like 100 people. It's reality. So, wrapping up, Rudge checklist for success. This is super simple to the point. I mean, it's a little fun, but just be able to find multiple kinds of bugs. Don't just be a web app person. Don't just be a mobile person. You need to diversify yourself, because if a company's hiring you full time, they're going to want to throw a bunch of different stuff at you. They want somebody they can just throw problems at and solutions come out. Just like any company, right? Any job, they want to throw problems at you and magic comes out. So you need to arm yourself and prove that you're able to do that. Understand the impact of these bugs. Don't just take CVSS scores. Don't just take scanner outputs. Don't just take the theory of the bug. Apply it to the real world. End to end, from the origination of the attack scenario to the very end, the impact where like the bad thing happens. And be realistic to yourself about how practical this is and what's the likelihood, given all the other bugs that a company has on their plate that they have to fix, whether it's actually worth their time to fix. Be able to actually help fix or prevent bugs with access to source code by being able to read source code and be able to communicate in code to software engineers who sometimes have zero insight to security. And that's not necessarily like they should understand security enough, but it's not their job to be security experts. It's their job to build features and make money. Your job is to be there to help them and get them there as much as possible. And be able to, in order to do that, you have to be able to communicate effectively. So it's easy to say like, oh yeah, if you follow this pattern, you'll get a job in Silicon Valley. I think that's true. I think reasonably, if you do all these things, so this is like amazing. Like we're talking about creating a superhuman, right? Like this is like the be all end all. Most people are going to wind up somewhere in between like nothing and what I just described. And above a certain bar in certain situations, that's perfectly fine. But maybe being in Silicon Valley is not your goal. Honestly, like I'm thinking of moving out, like and working remotely because it's like crazy expensive, and I can't even like afford to like go out to a movie because I can't afford childcare because it's like $30 an hour where I live. It's crazy. Yeah, right. So the reality is that like you can actually do what I was talking about many places in the world, and if you set that bar for yourself, you'll go anywhere. You can go anywhere. Silicon Valley is just like the hardest one, but if you even try this, you can go anywhere. And just so you know, this presentation was partly written and inspired by a good friend of mine, Reginaldo da Silva, who famously was found at the time the most impactful, most highly paid out Facebook bug ever. And they offered him a job. But he was an engineering manager in Brazil, software engineering manager for an accounting company or something like that. I forget. And he just did it on the side for extra money because they don't pay well in Brazil. So security wasn't even his thing. He just did it for the money initially, simplifying a bit. So here's a quote from him. The guy who went from Brazil, he had a job, he did bug bounty on the side for cash, and got a job offer at Facebook, and got the highest payout ever. By the way, the first version of his presentation was done in Brazil, so that's why he's quoting to Brazil. But it's applicable for India as well. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Now, I've left a lot of time for questions. Hit me.